Okay, I've wanted to talk about A Quiet Place for so long, but I've never really gotten around to it, mainly because I forgot. But recently a game came out that takes place in the A Quiet Place universe called A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead. And that made me remember, oh yeah, A Quiet Place. That's a really good franchise, right? And while today I don't really want to focus on the game, although I do think it's pretty good. I haven't finished it, so I don't feel qualified to talk about it right now. But I wanted to give my opinion on the franchise and the movies, because I feel like this movie franchise is pretty polarizing. Many people adore these movies and praise them for all the good that they do, while others pick holes in the plot and call it bad and don't enjoy it quite as much as others. And I kind of just wanted to talk about them. And for this video, I wanted to put some context on who I am and how this franchise has affected me and my personal experience with this franchise. Now, when I was younger, I wanted to watch something scary, but up until that point, I hadn't seen any horror movies. So my parents, not wanting to put on something too gruesome, threw on A Quiet Place, a PG-13 horror movie with Jim from The Office and Jim's wife. No, not that one. Yeah, which had great reviews and surely wasn't too scary as it was PG-13. So we watched it and I absolutely fell in love. I adored these movies for the reasons I'll get into in a bit, but more importantly, I loved the horror. The movie wasn't the scariest thing, but it got me into the horror scene. Soon after, the sequel came out, and you bet I was immediately in the theater seat waiting to watch it. So personally, I adore A Quiet Place for getting me into horror movies and the horror genre as a whole. But looking back on it, is the franchise good? Well, as you can probably tell from the title, yeah, I still hold this franchise up pretty high in terms of quality. And I still love all three films. So today I wanted to look at this franchise and break down all the parts that make this movie really something special in the sea of endless Hollywood apocalypse movies, and analyze the parts that make A Quiet Place such an amazing franchise. So starting with the first movie, one of my favorite aspects of A Quiet Place is its mastery of show don't tell. One of the biggest problems with a lot of movies, especially modern movies and shows, is this need to explain every detail possible to the audience rather than having that audience pick it up over time. A Quiet Place, however, is built in a way that makes telling the audience anything pretty much impossible, because the people in the movie literally die if they even whisper a little bit too loud. But I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the best examples in A Quiet Place of show don't tell is the opening. This opening shows us that sound in particular, and especially being quiet, is somehow an important part of this universe, but we aren't explicitly told, oh, if you step on a tree branch, you're gonna die. But subtle clues like the mother carefully handling pill bottles and not taking them with her shows clearly that the rattle of pill bottles overrides the basic need for medication. Or the way the daughter, Reagan, jumps to catch the falling rocket, as if the crash that would ensue would be too dangerous. Or the gravity and terror that's expressed when the father, Lee, sees a battery-powered toy. Something as simple as a toy is treated like a live explosive that, if activated, would kill them all. The fact that they're walking on sand also adds a layer of mystery that isn't immediately explained. Everyone speaking sign language to each other, clearly the family doesn't want to be heard, and the beginning barely has any background music or score, just the environment and the characters, which heightens the audience to be listening harder to what's going on. And once the score does kick in, you're hit with the beauty of it. The almost depressing yet hopeful stringed instruments emphasizing this setting perfectly. The only example of this opening outright telling the audience anything is this newspaper saying, "It's sound." However, this feels more like world building rather than telling the audience something, by showing that the world and the news was able to get a brief, all that shallow understanding of what was going on. And by the time this newspaper shows up, the audience has already got the point. Something makes any sort of noise dangerous. And this is further emphasized by how the opening ends. The little kid Bo, after taking the batteries that he was told not to take, turns on the toy and within seconds is swiftly taken and killed by this movie's antagonist, the Death Angels. Now, the aliens are an awesome part of the story that I'll get into in a bit, but for now, just think about how well this opening sets up the world. Through Bo's death, we are shown how ruthless, unsurvivable, and uncaring this apocalypse is. So much is expressed in these few opening moments, and don't lie, this opening hooked you for whatever the movie had next. This opening is so much more impressive to me given that Krasinski definitely could have told the audience this either through narration or an opening text scroll, but all the audience is straight up given or told is day numbers, and we are only shown the aftermath of something happening. Nothing is outright told. The way that's executed here makes for an amazing display of mystery, thrill, and revelation. Not everything is known, but the world is set up beautifully and masterfully, and all this is done in 10 minutes. What an opening. Another aspect that makes this so impressive is that this isn't a day one scene. Most zombie apocalypses, like, okay, I know they're infected, but The Last of Us, would usually start with life being normal and then something disrupting and bringing about the apocalypse. And these aren't bad. I'm actually going to talk about how I love a very similar scene in A Quiet Place 2 later, but it's more difficult to start in the middle of the action than at the beginning of it. And starting it here for A Quiet Place 1 is perfect. Another major aspect of these movies, and one of the overarching plots of them, is the family. A Quiet Place has shockingly good character development for a movie with little dialogue. Throughout the first movie, a major thread that holds the characters both together and apart is their collective loss of Beau. It's shown in a few places throughout the movie that each character feels responsible for his death. Lee feels responsible because he wasn't watching over him, and perhaps he didn't run fast enough. Evelyn feels responsible because she wasn't watching over him and regrets the fact that she didn't carry him when she definitely could have. Reagan especially because she gave him the toy that got him killed. And Marcus, I guess they were all out there in the first place because of him, so maybe he feels regretful of that. But obviously he misses him and mainly feels the regret that Reagan feels. And this is an apocalypse movie, don't get me wrong, but these basic human feelings expressed through these characters feels so real and powerful and shockingly realistic for an alien murder movie. We're also shown throughout the movie that this family is smart. Yeah, they make a few mistakes throughout the movie, Beau's death being a pretty big result of a few, but they aren't your typical horror movie doofuses. They create very elaborate and calculated plans in order to avoid or defend themselves against the creatures. The basement itself gives so much detail on the planning and research done by Lee. When Evelyn encounters a death angel in the basement, she hides behind a stream of water to mask her in the baby's noise. When the kids are in a silo, they know to lay on their backs as to not sink as easily. And the family knows how to be quiet. They aren't running around bumping on tables. They don't talk to each other basically at all throughout the movie. They have a stable food supply and a safe-ish home. They've learned that the waterfall masks their noise. They, from day one, knew how to keep their emotions and breathing in check so as to not attract unwanted attention. They are a smart family that knows how to survive. And in a world like this, no Joe Schmo would be able to survive, making this family that much more special. There are also many other aspects of the family that create a sense of relatability, especially through the writing and acting. Something as simple as the family praying over dinner, holding hands, creates realism and chemistry between the characters. The conversations between characters feel so genuine, as every character in this movie is acted to perfection. And I guess I'll talk about the acting right now. Who knew John Krasinski could both direct and act this well? Like everybody, I know this guy from The Office. And no, not that one. Yeah! Like I was saying, I knew of John Krasinski from The Office, you know, Jim, the icon, but I had actually only watched a few seasons when I first saw A Quiet Place, so when I think of old JK, I think of A Quiet Place first, and then The Office, which is actually kind of funny. But who knew he could act this well? His facial expressions and body movements capture this character and world so well. He shines especially in this scene when he thinks Evelyn is dead. Given that if he cries, he dies, he has to control these emotions, and Krasinski nails that. He's able to do all of this without speaking, just sign language and that sexy face of his. He and his co-star of this movie, Emily Blunt, play this couple so well, probably because they're married in real life, but it's still amazing to see a duo have this much chemistry and realism.
I'm actually married to Emily Blunt, and I feel pretty good about it.
Speaking of, Emily Blunt absolutely crushes this role. She's able to play the mother character so well, and her remorse over Beau feels so realistic and tragic. Not only is she able to convey these wide range of emotions, but she's also able to realistically give birth. Not many actors would be able to fake labor pains while trying not to scream, but Blunt does it perfectly. Her acting also shines in the flooded underground scene. So much fear, distress, worry for the baby is shown through her facial expressions. When she reminisces on Beau's death, you really feel the regret and sadness coursing through her. So the parents are both amazingly cast, but what about the kids of the family? Millicent Simmons plays Reagan amazingly. Like most of the rest of the cast, her facial expressions really shine. When Simmons is angry, sad, and distressed, you see those emotions realistically. Noah Jupe is also a great choice for Marcus. Jupe plays the scared kid in an apocalyptic world really well, and Marcus is the character that physically appears the most scared throughout his scenes. That's part of his arc in both movies, but playing a character that's constantly in fear and can't control that is a tough feat, and Jupe does great. And the best actor in this movie is obviously Leon Russom as the old man in the woods. Okay, I'm joking, but that scream was pretty well done. All of these actors create a sense of chemistry with each other that really appears like a real family. They all excel at their roles and work together so well to create this family. One of my favorite parts of the first A Quiet Place movies is that it's not actually an alien movie. It is, as CinemaWins puts it,
A family story, and then also had aliens in it.
while a large focus of the movie is put on the Death Angels because they are what makes the story what it is, the overarching plot points of the movie don't actually revolve around the Death Angels. A family grieving for the loss of their child while everyone collectively feels like it's their fault or they didn't do enough is a human story that doesn't need an apocalypse. Oftentimes with loss, the first things people look at is what they could have done to stop it or what they could have done differently. And A Quiet Place takes that and applies it to an alien invasion story. There's a montage towards the middle of the movie that shows the family all mourning and taking the blame on themselves. Evelyn crying in Beau's room, looking at all his toys and collections. Reagan visiting the site of his death, and Lee and Marcus discussing how it's no one's fault while Reagan blames herself. That's tragedy that's beautifully expressed in this movie.
Basically what happened was I was sent a script 3 weeks after having our second daughter. And so yes, it's a scary movie, but what was in it is a story about this family trying to survive. What would it, what would you do for your kids? Like what extremes would you go to protect your kids? And I was such a wide open vessel after having our second daughter that I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. And so now when people say like, man, the movie's so scary, I'm like, thank you so much. But the best compliment is when people come out and they said, I'd never thought I'd cry in a horror movie. And I'm like, that's it. That's why I did it.
So while the central plot of this movie is a frankly grounded story, it's brought into a world of societal collapse and apocalypse. That's awesome. We don't actually get a good look at the Death Angels until about 10 minutes after the movie ends. Yes, they're in frame a few times throughout the movie, but this is the only time in the movie we're actually given a close-up, detailed look at them. So the climax of the Alien movie is this moment at the very end, but the climax of the family story is this moment. And goodness, this scene is amazing. I love how this scene perfectly brings to a close Lee's arc for this movie. Earlier, when he's talking with Marcus by the waterfall, Marcus mentions how Lee should actually tell Reagan that he loves her because she holds so much resentment and a regret over the loss of Beau. And in this moment, Lee is able to sacrifice himself for his children and to tell Reagan how much he loves her. And of course, the musical track for this section is absolutely gorgeous. Marco Beltrami, I'm sorry if I butchered that, creates a beautiful score for this movie, but it really shines in this scene with the subtle either plucks of the guitar or light taps on the piano. Either way, it's just so devastating. And then the strings kick in and all the emotions of the scene kick in. Goodness, it combines so well with the scene. Lee's death through Krasinski's amazing facial expressions and scream, and Reagan's reactions sell this scene so well. It's so tragic, heartbreaking, and beautiful at the same time. But the movie is still not over. The way this movie ends is with reconciliation and revenge. The shared moment between Evelyn and Reagan regarding Lee's death, heartbreaking. But then a Death Angel appears and we get a good first look at the thing. And I love this horrific design. The sharp teeth, the weird movements movements of the face plates that seem to move with the sound it's hearing, the creepy, almost human-like body. It's just so cool looking. And before we talk about this finale, I want to interrupt real quick and talk about the Death Angels as a whole, because they're probably my favorite alien design and concept of all time. The Death Angels are a fascinating creation. Blind alien creatures with the ability to hear a pin drop from a mile away that kill on sight and will kill without a second thought. It's just such a cool idea. They're also impossibly fast, being able to run at speeds that can compete with a car. They're also covered in bulletproof and blast-proof armor, making them both a formidable, threatening foe, but also basically unkillable. They also kill you within seconds, which is honestly more terrifying than them slowly killing you, because what's more scary than a creature that can kill you faster than you can even know you're dead? A smaller detail about them that actually flies under the radar is that they clearly have some effect on electricity. Lights flicker when they're near, TVs go all staticky when they come close to them, and the flashlight starts flashing when the kids get attacked in the silo. This could be an explanation for why the aliens get affected by Reagan's cochlear implant. This could be an explanation for why the aliens get affected by Reagan's cochlear implant, and the reason why that implant is their only weakness. That's an interesting detail that not a lot of people talk about that I find fascinating. Another thing that always confused me but now makes me more intrigued by the Death Angels is that they don't react to sounds made by other Death Angels. Whether that be an angel slamming TVs around, tearing holes in silos and creating a bunch of sound, or just hunting prey, they seem to not be drawn to that type of noise, which is weird at a first glance, but also can be explained as they can distinguish or differentiate among noises made by them or something else. Usually these noises are also accompanied by a Death Angel screaming, so maybe that tips them off. But regardless, that maybe points an idea that these things are rather smart, but also they attack anything that makes noise, even if it isn't a threat, so maybe they're just attacking for the sake of attacking. Who knows? The introduction and various scenes throughout the movie set up these antagonists as bloodthirsty, merciless apex predators that will stop at nothing to kill every last human on Earth. Whether it be that they're intelligent or mindless serial killers, either possibility is terrifying. What really matters is that they're unbeatable. At least almost unbeatable. After the death of Lee, there's a sense of anger in the air, and you can see it on Evelyn's face. She's not just scared, she's pissed. This thing killed her husband after all, and having this ending be a standoff between Evelyn and the Death Angel is awesome. And I love the realization and discovery of the implant doing something to the Death Angel. It's been debated what's actually going on here, but what matters is that it hurts the creature, allowing Evelyn to swoop in and vengeance is taken, there are monsters on their way, and the movie ends in a triumphant, battle-ready. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, her husband just died, why is she happily smirking to her daughter? First off, it allows for one hell of a cut to black. Like, come on, this is sick. And also, I've never gotten the feeling that her only emotion during this moment is excitement. She was crying like 5 minutes ago. But this is a hopeful moment. They can finally fight back, and that is a semi-happy ending. So that's the first movie, and looking back on it, it's still amazing. Every actor's performance is perfect. The set pieces and direction are both done beautifully, the story is shockingly beautiful and human, and the Death Angels are a sick concept that create for a unique world. I like how this movie sets up its own sort of niche genre to the point that when Bird Box came out, a movie about if you look at something you die, everybody called it A Quiet Place but for sight. Honestly, I love that. A world that limits humanity on probably our biggest attribute. We're stupid loud. And this movie flawlessly executes a world in which there is no sound. Are there plot holes? Maybe. There are a few things in this movie that make me think a little bit. Like, how did the government not kill these things? How did nobody figure out that cochlear implants affect the aliens? Also, we have really powerful weapons, so how did we not kill them? How did this Death Angel attack Lee when he was being pretty silent? Why did they light every single candle in this scene? And then everybody says, why didn't they just move to the waterfall? And honestly, a few of these just kind of make me laugh. The biggest being the waterfall argument. argument. Think about it just a little bit logically. This family has a successful farm with tons of food and equipment, and you want them to move all of that to a waterfall? There's no way anybody could do that quietly and efficiently at the same time. Another thing people say is, okay, if moving isn't an option, why not set up some sort of speaker system that blasts waterfall noises around the farm? And that's even stupider. Unless the Abbotts have a speaker system already blaring noise when the aliens came to Earth, setting up one of these would bring every alien to them, and then they just destroy the speakers. Like, what? And the military one is actually kind of explained by the newspaper clippings in which they show bombs being literally useless against them. And maybe the military tried that. Maybe they survived and are figuring something out right now. But also, military bases are really loud, and I wouldn't be shocked if after cities, the aliens targeted those next. So that's always felt like a weak plot hole in my opinion, because we see how quickly these things can kill people, and if they go to a military base, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if they could take out a military base in one day. Another complaint I've heard about this movie is the supposed sexism. When Lee and Marcus go fishing together, Reagan wants to go with them, but Lee tells her to stay home. At a first glance, this could be seen as the father and son leaving the wife and daughter to stay at the home. So sexist, right? Well, when you look at it even just a little bit deeper, you realize that Reagan doesn't need to come and probably shouldn't go with them on this little vacation. The reason Marcus is brought specifically isn't just so they can go fishing together, but it's to show Marcus that they can yell near the waterfall, aka he doesn't have to be scared all the time, and there are moments where they're safe. Marcus, being a big scaredy cat, needed a moment to tell him to not be worried and control his emotions in a world that required that sacrifice. Reagan doesn't need that. Does she get scared at times? Of course she does, everyone does, but not all the time, and she's also older. So it's not because she's a girl, but because Marcus needs this and she doesn't. Also, walking through the woods is way quieter when you only have one extra person than with two extra people. So there's also that. And I don't want to dwell much more on these quote unquote major problems, because if these logistical problems cause you to dislike a movie, I don't know what you'll enjoy, quite frankly. If you don't like it because you think the story or camera work is bad, we disagree, but at least that would make sense. But these complaints get brought up so many times when people talk about this franchise, and honestly, I think the latter installments answer all of these problems perfectly. But in general, this movie is really, really good. It's a masterpiece. It's no wonder a few years later, A Quiet Place Part 2 came out. Now, A Quiet Place Part 2 was wrought with similar critic reviews as the first one, but I've definitely heard a lot of people say they dislike this one more than the first one. And that's to be expected with any sequel. And I'll touch on my feelings of the movies in comparison to each other later, but for now, I stand with the idea that this movie absolutely slaps. One aspect of the latter films that doesn't really apply so much to the first movie is that A Quiet Place Part 2 makes regular, everyday sounds, especially in the opening, feel so astronomically loud. Loud noises happen in the first movie, of course, but when the opening starts with Lee driving a car and slamming his car door down with maximum force, the audience sort of shrivels up in fear. Don't be loud because we know something is coming. And that's not all I love about this opening. I've always been a huge fan of Day One sequences, and while I do like that the first movie doesn't contain one, as it uses the aftermath perfectly to imply what happened, for a sequel, showing regular life getting interrupted by an alien invasion is amazing, and I'm all for it. I love how out of nowhere the invasion happens and how it's revealed with the big comet. I also love how this opening shows realistic reactions to this sort of thing, because in horror movies you'd expect people to start screaming in fear, running for their life, but in reality it would probably look a lot like this. Seeing something like this would probably cause people to react in a calm yet very confused and scared fashion, and I love that added realism. It adds a lot to these characters and makes their impending doom feel a lot more tragic and close to home. And then the movie hits us with the reveal. And now, we are in for the alien invasion. The opening cuts between the different characters' perspectives and mainly focuses on Lee and Evelyn's locations. We are given another very tasteful and amazing jump scare, to to which she then books it away. Now, both of these jump scares reveals are sick as can be. The first one isn't so much as a jump scare as you can hear it running, but it does set the invasion in motion beautifully. The second one is for the reveal of Evelyn and the kids and not so much of the audience, and it's also in the midst of the invasion, making it more of a danger as they're right in the middle of everything. We are then thrust into the invasion with chaos, murder, and destruction as far as the eyes can see. I know it might be wrong to describe a kill as cool, but this kill was pretty cool, with the crazy reach of the alien and their ruthlessness being shown here. And that's further shown in the bar scene when all the people are hiding and a phone goes off. And this sets a death angel into the bar, mercilessly killing everyone in it except Lee and Reagan, who are able to escape. Now, I love this opening scene for a lot of reasons. Before the aliens drop in, you get a really realistic small town feel that shows characters' interactions in a really sweet way. In addition, every character that we know feels very similar to the ones in the first movie. Marcus is still scared, this time of baseballs, and the obvious. Evelyn controls herself very well under pressure and is able to keep herself and her kids safe. Lee is very cautious and smart when it comes to these new unknown creatures, and Reagan is still caring for her family, but is a little reckless at times. The new characters that are set up, mainly Cillian Murphy's character Emmett, feel realistic and set up a very important moment later in the movie, that being the dive sign language. While being played off sort of as a joke in the opening, I love how that comes back at the dock scene, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I mentioned the jump scares, but this opening use of the Death Angels is so engaging. It's very obvious right off the bat that they had a higher budget for this one because the animation and modeling of the Death Angels really shines in making a threat that we already know feel scary and new again. In terms of the story of this movie overall, I love it. The split up that occurs creates for a really beautiful plot for every character involved. Reagan and Emmett's plot point is both incredibly tense and relaxing once they get onto the island, at least for a little bit, and I really enjoyed Reagan and Emmett's relationship in this part. And both Cillian Murphy and Millicent Simmons play their roles incredibly well. I mean, y'all have seen Oppenheimer, you know Cillian Murphy can act, but Simmons really shines bright in this arc, especially in this scene when she thinks Emmett abandoned her. Goodness, could you feel every moment she was going through without even hearing her? Wait a minute. Pause. How have I talked about the entire first movie up until this point, and I haven't mentioned Reagan's silent moments? Throughout both movies, the audience gets brief glimpses into Reagan's world with absolutely no sound whatever, and I love this artistic choice. It allows for a moment of tension that isn't felt anywhere else because we aren't given any auditory clues. It also allows for us to realize how difficult it would be for a deaf person to survive in a world like this, as they wouldn't be able to hear any sound and would thus have a harder time realizing auditory mistakes or problems near them. So it tenses the audience and brings us into Reagan's shoes in a spectacular way. Back to the story, however, Reagan and Emmett's storyline crescendos in a really tense way to the dock scene, in which they are surrounded by, I'll say it, some very creepy people that are unbelievably threatening. It's here that we get the payoff for the dive sign language that was set up earlier, which is incredible. Like, every time I see Murphy do the dive motion, I get chills because how sick of a payoff is that? Then Reagan does in fact do as he says and dives into the water, to which a Death Angel comes running at the sound of the cowbells attached to Emmett. This rampage is particularly very gruesome, with people getting shoved around and slashed by the dozens, and this guy gets way overkilled, like goodness gracious. And this scene is an interesting way of showing how other people have reacted to this apocalypse, similar to something like The Walking Dead. It seems that the alien invasion led to bringing the absolute worst out of certain people, and the dock dwellers here are a very creepy and weird way of showing that. It isn't outright stated, but I always got the impression that these people are cannibals and they use this girl as bait to lure people in. And that's honestly way more disturbing than the Death Angels. While this is going on, the movie cuts to both Marcus and Evelyn's perspective, and to say their situation is worse would be up for debate, but it does suck for both of them. Marcus accidentally alerts an alien to his location, in which he hides in the vault, but it locks him in, causing him to start suffocating, and he then has to make the choice to take some of the air from the baby in order to survive. And this is a terribly tense scene. It's set up really well with the door closing without the towel to allow it to open, and then Marcus's realization is so disturbingly terrifying, and Jupe really sells the panic and dilemma going through Marcus's head right here. During this, Evelyn shoots a gun to get the Death Angel away from Marcus, and then she shoots and explodes an oxygen tank right on the creature. Of course, this is to no avail, but this does cause the fire alarm to go off, muting her sound, allowing her to get to Marcus and get the door open, saving his life. Now, these two scenes being played over each other and edited together create for one of the most tense and shocking sequences of events I've ever seen in film. It is truly a masterclass in editing and direction. On top of this, the music builds so well in creating a memorable and powerful climax. Goodness, is this such an amazing moment that I adore. Now, once Reagan and Emmett are able to escape these people, they reach an island with a little civilization on it. This moment is a breath of fresh air as the characters are able to live regular life without the fear of a Death Angel attack. Bonfires are thrown, people are able to talk to each other, and this scene is such a nice breather for this tense franchise. It's also here that we get some exposition from the aptly named Man on Island, to which he gives us some detail on his day one experience, in which he explains a situation where the government allowed people to evacuate through boats as the creatures couldn't swim. But once people realized they could safely escape, they started fighting for seats, causing noises and alerting the Death Angels to their position.
They had 12 boats lined up on the dock that day. Only 2 got out.
And this exposition is just really beautiful and provides a lot of insight that's expanded on in the next movie of the franchise. Now, of course, this solitude and safety couldn't last forever. Once Emmett finds this boat from the dock that he knows has a Death Angel on it, all hell breaks loose. By the way, this boat can actually be seen in this shot as they move towards the island, and it even has the Death Angel on it looking around. If that isn't Chekhov's gun, I don't know what is. It's this moment before the alien attacks that the movie once again pulls the ability to make any everyday sound feel so loud to us. The creaking swings, the crash and bang of the bucket in the well, it just creates such a great moment of fear in the audience. And once the alien does go on a rampage, it's just so epic. This attack is just unbelievably tragic. Seeing a safe and peaceful utopia be torn apart by one alien is terrifying, and a solemn reminder that no matter where you are, in a quiet place, you are not safe. I also love the kind of self-sacrifice of Emmett Reagan and Man on Island as they get into the car to lead the monster away. This also leads to some really epic action, but I like the use of the characters to try to save the remaining on the island. It's also doubly sad that Man on Island gets killed because he fears that the alien went back for his family. Just so sad and brutal at the same time. But then the audience gets led into the finale of this movie, the fight between the Death Angel in the radio station and the Death Angel in the basement. Once again, the movie cuts from one character to another, showing their different situations. But this scene gives us the main resolution to the kids' arc for these movies. In an amazingly epic turn of events, Reagan slams the implant into the radio's microphone, transmitting it to both the stations and Marcus's speakers. At this moment, Reagan confidently approaches the alien with a sharp pole, while Marcus bravely does the same with a speaker and gun. And at that moment, they both slay their beasts. Now, as previously mentioned, Marcus in both movies is a wimp. And I'm not saying that to clown on him. It's just how he's portrayed, and that's not unrealistic for a young kid to be terrified of things that can kill you pretty easily. So to see in this moment Marcus being brave and walking towards the Death Angel rather than away from it, it is absolutely breathtaking. He's obviously still scared, but this is a massive jump in the direction of growth, and I adore that. The movie parallels both storylines amazingly, both adults being injured to the point of uselessness while the children have to take up the responsibility to defend them, Reagan saving the rest of the family through the radioed implant frequency, and Marcus's reaction and utilization of this is just so awesome and impactful. And obviously the editing and writing play a huge role in this ending's impact. The ability to weave two storylines together is a huge accomplishment for every writer and editor involved with this story, because they definitely could have felt disconnected or unaffected from each other, but they cohabitate so well in the same moments that it makes them feel like one complete story. That's awesome and a huge achievement for this movie. One great thing about the second movie overall is its ability to not make the Death Angels feel easily beatable. The end of the first movie set up a way to defeat the aliens with the implant and a shotgun pairing pretty well together. So going into this movie, I was worried that either that wouldn't be used at all, or it would be used so much that it feels overpowered. A lot of video games have struggled with this in the past, with giving players something powerful at the end of one movie and then nerfing or changing it into the sequel so as to not make the game too easy. So this movie takes a different different approach to this power problem. It puts the characters, especially in the beginning, in places where they need to use this newfound fighting ability, and then puts them in significantly worse situations that either remove this ability or make it unhelpful. Towards the beginning of the movie, Marcus gets caught in a bear trap in one amazing break of tension, and then a Death Angel confronts them, to which they use the killing method, and it works. But later, Reagan leaves in order to find the island in the little hope she has left to get her family to safety, thus splitting up the group, which makes this technique pretty much impossible. So A Quiet Place 2 recognizes this overpowered Death Angel murder technique, but doesn't cause it to ruin the movie. And that's a great way of doing it. And it's not like it's forgotten. Reagan and Emmett use it in the train to take out one that's threatening them, and of course Marcus and Reagan use it towards the end. So that way the story can continue still having that tension while not forgetting this pretty crucial plot point. And overall, this movie is really well made and written. But how it compares to the first is an interesting discussion. For me, I feel they're pretty close to each other, but the first one just takes the cake between these two. As mentioned, one of the best feats of the first movie is the ability to tell a relatively basic story about grief and family hardships with the context of an alien movie. The focus wasn't on the aliens, but they did play a role in the focus. The sequel, having roughly $44 million more to work with, had a bigger focus on the world and by proxy the aliens. Obviously, the day one sequence gives us a ton of lore and detail about where the Death Angels came from and gives much more detail on what they look like up close. So this movie, in my opinion, has much better action than the first one, but the original used artistic indie qualities that gave it a more unique and charming vibe. Also, the low-ish budget comes with CGI restrictions and thus creates a sense of mystery around the Death Angels as they are seen sparingly until the end of the movie. Part 2 is no doubt bigger than the first one, but the small, secluded, and of course quiet nature of the first film made it what it is, and is what made Lee's sacrifice significantly greater, as the slow and quiet nature of the film made us gravitate more on the characters rather than on the Death Angels. So the first movie definitely felt more personal. I talked a lot about both movies' openings because I feel those scenes really emphasize the greatness of each movie. The first one showed us the world through the aftermath and only hinted at what really happened, allowing audiences to pick it up for themselves through what is shown on screen. The second one, already having that context, allows us to see the collapse of the world for ourselves, and using the significantly larger budget, focused on the terror of the aliens and how a realistic town would react to something like this. So both movies thrive in different ways in terms of what they want to say and show using this world. They are both acted to perfection, whether it be the major players or the relatively minor players. I literally don't think I have a single problem with any of the acting choices. My personal favorite actor in the second movie is Island Person number 2. I think they killed it. I actually don't know if I have a favorite actor or character in either movie. Everyone is cast well and together create a realistic and tragic post-apocalyptic group of survivors. In addition to the acting, the directing, and especially the camera work shine in both movies. Due to the smaller nature of the first movie, a lot of really beautiful shots came out of the symmetry and simplicity of the film, especially in the opening. And the second has a lot of notably great camera movements towards, away from, or following the characters to either give a sense of communion with the characters or give a sense of dread, all creating an amazing viewing experience. All this to say, both movies' scorings are very, very close to one another, but I slightly prefer the first movie for the reasons listed, and these are the scorings I would give them out of 10. And both movies did very well in the box office, so of course, we got a trilogy on our hands, baby, let's go. And this year, 2024, we got A Quiet Place Day 1. I originally wasn't going to talk about Day 1 because honestly, it feels very different from the rest of the movies, mainly because Krasinski isn't the director of this one. Not saying that's a bad thing, he still helped write the thing, but my original focus of this video was on the Krasinski movies and what made them so special to me. But honestly, while the third one, being a spin-off, has a slightly different vibe with different characters and different setting, I definitely don't think I should ignore this one because the movie works really well with what we know from the other movies and addresses a lot of the plot problems many people had with the first couple. The first thing audiences will notice about this film is this opening line of text describing the sheer amount of noise created by New York and comparing it to a constant, never-ending scream. This opening text is perfect for a third installment of a franchise built around the concept of sound attracting murder aliens. It gives some insight into why cities fell apart so fast, as in the first movie, society collapsed in less than 89 days, and it sets a layer of fear in the audience as, like the second movie, this automatically heightens the audience to be listening to every sound made in this movie. Every line of dialogue, every car horn, every footstep instills worry and anxiety in the audience, and this opening text makes the audience worried to be in New York. And given what the audience knows about New Yorkers, another fear that would be instilled in them is that y'all are really loud. Right after that, the audience gets to meet this movie's protagonist, Sam, a cancer patient living in hospice with a group of other patients. Sam is a pessimist in a very dark situation. Being terminally ill, understandably, takes its toll on people in a lot of different ways. But for Sam, she's bitter, gloomy, and angry, either at her situation or at the people around her. While this could be seen as unlikable by people without a bone of empathy in their body, there is an aura of endearment to her that's shown through both her dialogue and humor. It's especially expressed when they go to the marionettes show and she starts to cry at the puppet floating and falling, either making her recollect on her own life or symbolizing for the audience what we know is about to happen. Things are about to go down quickly. After the puppet show, the movie once again gives the audience a taste of just how loud New York really is, just before giving the audience what is the closest depiction of the alien attack seen so far, when a meteorite swiftly crashes right in the middle of the streets of New York and the Death Angels quickly go on a rampage. If anything, I think the sheer number of meteoroids shown in this scene give the audience a good reason as to why the silencing of the Earth in a larger scale happens so quickly, because in the first two, they're in a small town that could definitely have been taken out pretty fast. But the newspapers and general vibe give the idea that this invasion led to a lot more destruction than is shown in the first two movies. So seeing this many meteoroids rushing into Earth can give the sense of how many aliens are now on Earth, slaughtering people by the tens of thousands every minute. And while this movie does in fact have a story surrounding the characters, it has a particularly larger focus on the Death Angels than what we previously saw in the first two movies. We'll get into a scene that explains this in more detail, but for now, this opening shows the audience in an incredibly close encounters with the aliens in the first moments they are on Earth, and how their introduction affected those that were in close proximity to the initial impacts. The camera work and direction for the scene really give the sense of confusion and terror in the minds of the New Yorkers who have no idea what's going on. The camera being really close to Sam's face gives the claustrophobic and disorienting feeling that would happen in a dust cloud like this, and during this moment we get some incredible Death Angel shenanigans. Notably, I love this moment with the military officer as their walkie-talkie erupts with the terror in the voice of another soldier, causing them to be grabbed and killed instantly. It really gives the idea that this was so unexpected, even the military wasn't ready or prepared for an invasion like this. Then an ambulance explodes due to a Death Angel attack, and Sam wakes up in the Marionette Theater. This opening, like all of them, is incredible. It perfectly sets up Sam as a protagonist and sets up and explains her motivation and stubbornness to go get pizza in the city. Sam is an incredibly realistic and well-created character that has flaws and endearing traits to her that makes for a good protagonist in a world like this. It gives the audience a great look at what First Contact really looked like and how the military and general public reacted to it. It's directed to perfection, the acting by everyone is amazing, but notably, Lupita Nyong'o crushes the role of Sam and really plays this character well. And the Death Angels we do see are pretty epic, so that's awesome. Another defining moment for this movie is the crowd sequence. After the military announces that they will be evacuating people, a large crowd of people starts walking towards it in a long line. Now, at first I was like, they're making a lot of noise. Shouldn't they have been killed by now? But something that I think is less explained throughout the movies is that the aliens seem to be drawn more to quick, sharp noises than to longer, more ambient sounds, like the waterfall, or say a lot of people slowly shuffling throughout the streets. And it's not like they ignore this new sound. There's an alien right there checking it out, but it seems to be less important to the Death Angels than, say, someone screaming. And once someone does scream, yeah, it's over. The Angels go on a massive killing spree, and it's both tragic, but also pretty sick at the same time. I'm sorry. And later throughout the movie, we meet Eric, who is so confused and scared out of his mind that he resorts to following a cat that leads him to Sam. Eric is similar to Marcus in a way, as he's pretty scared and worried about everything, but Eric is much better at not showing fear and staying composed better, and is more akin to how an adult adult would deal with this fear rather than a child. Eric is a character that is really well set up, and the way he follows Sam makes him feel like a lost puppy just clinging on to anyone he finds that will make him feel safe. The relationship between Sam and Eric feels so realistic and sweet off the bat, and the scene that particularly stood out to me was when they're in the apartment reading her poetry, and Eric slowly realizes Sam's situation. It's heartbreaking and devastating, and throughout the movie they just become so close, and you really root for both of them surviving this and getting away, especially towards the end with the boats and Sam's sacrifice. But before that, I want to talk about a scene that was very interesting to me when I first saw it, and that is the Death Angel nest scene. Frodo, the cat, and basically the main character, wanders into an area filled with what can only be described as alien hairballs, and Eric follows Frodo in order to keep it alive, in which he stumbles upon a Death Angel tearing a ball open and calling out to more Death Angels, to which more arrive and start feasting. Then Eric, of course, makes a slight noise, and the audience gets introduced to the Queen Death Angel, a massive Death Angel that's head is about as big as Eric's entire body, and whew, is that terrifying. This scene gives a lot of interesting information about the Death Angel's lore that is just the right amount of explanation to inform the audience, but also keep them intrigued as to what else can be shown and explained. But moving on, one of the most beautiful and important parts of this movie is the relationship between Eric and Sam. Eric goes to such lengths to try to help Sam get what she wants, and then Sam in the end gives up everything for him to be able to escape. The scene of them both mourning the loss of the pizza place and the subsequent attempt by Eric to cheer her up by doing a jazz and magic routine is so heartwarming, and Sam running, hitting cars to get the Death Angel's attention while Eric runs for the boats is so beautiful. They both help each other in so many ways, and the actors are able to portray their emotions without saying a single word. The jazz place scene being one of the best examples of silent storytelling I've ever seen. Just music and the characters' reactions and expressions. The movie is also perfectly able to bring Sam's story to a close. Because she doesn't have long to live, the only thing she can tangibly hold onto is the promise of the pizza in the city. And once she has that, she's content, and the movie ends. And Eric, and more importantly, Frodo's story, is also a great tie into part 2 with Man on Island, reprising his role and interacting with Eric as he makes it on the boat. This movie is a prime example of how to do a spin-off, and it's just so good. There are a few complaints that a lot of people have had about the release of day one that I find very interesting. One of the first that I saw was that this is just another A Quiet Place movie with not much special about it to set it apart from the rest of the pack, especially in terms of storytelling. And of course, opinions on a movie are going to be subjective, and if you feel this way, I totally respect your opinion, but on the contrary, I have no idea what any of these people are talking about. For one, this is probably one of the most story-driven apocalypse movies out there. Sam's story, while being seen maybe as stubborn or annoying, is actually really heartwarming if you look at it with a little detail. And the story around Sam and Eric is so well written and told. It's just such a good story, and I really have no idea what people are talking about when they say this is just another A Quiet Place film or one that doesn't have great storytelling, because it does have great storytelling. Sam's arc is beautiful, and it's honestly really sad. The character moments are so well acted and they work well together. I really have no idea what people mean when they say that, but yeah, whatever. Another complaint that absolutely baffles me is that some people think this movie didn't expand the lore of the Death Angels or explain why they're on Earth or what they are. And I have a few rebuttals. If the fact that a movie doesn't leave things up to your imagination or explain everything about everything in a story makes you dislike a movie, that's really confusing to me. One of the best parts of the first movie, as I've said a handful of times, is that it doesn't explain everything. That was one of the points of the movie. It's about a family, not about the aliens. The second gave us some explanation into what a day one would look like, but the ideas of who the Death Angels were and what their species was like was up to interpretation, and that was a part of the beauty. Also, did you not watch the movie? This movie did offer up a ton of details about the Death Angels. It shows us that they came here on a lot of asteroids, or one big asteroid that got split up, that they brought their own food source with them, expands the ideas that they can't swim and can drown, just like any other organic creatures. It shows us that for some reason, there's a Death Angel that is slower and 3 times as big as the regular ones. For what reason that exists is not explained, but it's cool that it's there. And I get wanting to have details explained to you about a mystery you find interesting, but I can't wrap my head around people who dislike a movie because it doesn't explain stuff that does not matter in the slightest. Why the aliens came to Earth doesn't matter. For all I care, it could be and probably was a massive accident. Why the aliens kill humans doesn't matter. Maybe they just hate things that are loud. Maybe they're threatened or scared, or maybe they just find it fun. Who gives a fuck? These details and explanations don't matter, but the movie gives what they want to give regardless. And the serious problems people did have with the first movie, like why did the government not do anything, is answered pretty well in this movie. They did in fact do a lot. They bombed bridges to keep the infestation relatively controlled. They tried to evacuate as many people as they can, and they sent aircraft with speakers overhead to warn citizens that they hunt based on sound and can't swim. So it just really confuses me when people try to say this franchise is bad because it doesn't explain enough. Do you want a movie to hold your hand, or do you want to be treated like a grown-up who can draw their own conclusions and have their own ideas? And maybe, who knows, maybe an alien a couple decades ago heard Bon Jovi over the radio and was like, oh hell yeah, that sounds awesome, I'm gonna go there, and then they crashed into New York and everyone was loud, and so they got scared and started killing everything. Who knows? It doesn't matter. You signed up for an alien invasion movie, and that's what you got. A Quiet Place has never been focused on said aliens. Yeah, it gives us hints as to what they are, it shows them in detail, what their weaknesses are, what they're like, but the focus has always been on the people, the characters in this world and their struggles, and that's what I signed up for, and Day One excels at that, and the alien stuff wasn't half that bad either. So a win-win. Like, I don't get the complaint. And I know I'm going on about this complaint way too long, but imagine when Avengers Infinity War came out, spoilers for that movie by the way, if people went online and gave the movie 2 stars because they thought the movie would be about the heroes defeating the villain, but the villain wins? What? This movie's so bad because it's not what I thought it would be. Or people being like, oh, they didn't explain enough about Thanos's birth. Or it's so weird to me to complain about a movie because it didn't explain the exact stuff you wanted explained. Like, you're not making the movie. Like I said, I get wanting to have stuff explained, and if a movie sets up those mysteries, which A Quiet Place does set up those mysteries, you might want them explained, but that's not the focus of the movies. And it does explain a bunch of stuff. Like, I don't get this complaint at all. In conclusion, if you dislike this movie because it doesn't explain everything, in the words of Petra, more power to you. But for a franchise like this, I don't know what else you expected.
He kind of laid out, in the second Quiet Place, they referenced Day One in New York City. Jaimin Hansu's character talks about that. And they were kind of, Paramount and John had decided, we want to explore that story. What did New York on Day One look like? And so he kind of gave me that prompt and said, what's your in to this? Like, what would you want to explore that would feel like a movie all your own? And then he just gave me a lot of freedom to kind of find this world for myself, find these characters, and find that emotional core. And then we would bounce ideas back and forth, and he would read drafts and all that. It was just really kind of generous of him to sort of hand this over and say, hey, make this your own.
A Quiet Place is not a perfect franchise. I definitely had some problems with every movie, and there are definitely some places where you can be like, wait, huh? I'm not sitting here saying this franchise is perfect by no means, but I do think it's incredible. The problems I have with the movies maybe take up 1 or 2 scenes out of the whole movie, and they aren't plot problems or major problems with the movie, just small little details. So while I don't think they're perfect, Krasinski created something really special with the first 2 movies, and then Michael Sarnoski picked up with Day One really well and created an amazing spin-off. And these movies are really important to me. They got me into horror, contain some of my personal favorite moments out of any movie I've seen, and I just love seeing Jim from The Office. What can I say? And I'm really glad you decided to watch me ramble about these movies, and I hope you enjoyed it. According to Wikipedia, a third A Quiet Place part is in production and will likely be the finale to the Abbott story. And being a fan of all this franchise has to offer, I will be there Day One, sitting in this theater, munching on popcorn with the fam, and I can't wait for it. I also won't be shocked if they just keep making movies about different people surviving in this world, and with a concept like this, they could do it anywhere with any protagonist they want. People will come to see alien shenanigans with a good story, and they'll probably get that. If anything, I fear this franchise will burn out and people won't come to see it as it gets oversaturated, as with a lot of popular franchises. But for now, I'm excited to see what this franchise will do with this concept, and I can't wait to see more. Thank you for watching. God bless. Have a good day, friends.